Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amanda Miller. I'm a mom, I'm an attorney, and I'm someone who calls Rhinebeck home. I love this town deeply, enough to be genuinely concerned about the direction we're headed.
From the Daily Catch, this is The Catch Up. I'm Emily Sachar, and that was Amanda Miller. More on her in a minute. This week on the Daily Catch podcast, a seismic shift in Rhinebeck town politics with a Democratic primary for town supervisor that's already turning feisty. Town Supervisor Elizabeth Spinzia announced last week that she will not seek reelection, and she has endorsed Deputy Supervisor Debbie Hecht as her successor. But Miller has launched a high-energy campaign of her own, pitching term limits, structural reform, and what she calls a return to a more public town board. At a packed kickoff event Sunday evening at Kip's Tavern in Rhinecliff, Miller sharply criticized the current leadership of the Rhinebeck Town Board. Hecht then fired back, saying Miller misunderstands both her record and even the role of supervisor. With the petition period beginning this week, ahead of a June Democratic primary, the race is quickly becoming a referendum on continuity versus change. We welcome back, for the second week in a row, Eloise Goldsmith, our Rhinebeck beat reporter, to break what we know so far in this first week of the campaign about the candidates and the fault lines, and to tell us what this contest signals about the future of Rhinebeck town government. It's the week of February 24th. Eloise, welcome back.
Hi, Emily. I'm glad to be here.
So, Eloise, let's start with the big picture. Elizabeth Spinzia said last week that she had always intended this term would be her last. But is that true? And beyond that, why do you think she decided not to run again?
Well, she certainly waited to announce that she wouldn't run if this had always been her intention. I know that the news surprised us at the Daily Catch a bit, and we can take her at her word, but also highlight a couple of noteworthy developments in the past few months. In the fall, listeners might remember there was a challenge to her leadership. There was this sort of mysterious write-in campaign to support Village Mayor Gary Bassett to replace her. He ended up getting a sizable share of the vote. There's also the fact that Spinzia has never had a Democratic primary challenger before. And when she announced last week that she was not going to run again, there were already whispers that there would be a primary challenger. No one had been named, but we knew that someone was going to announce on Sunday, the day that Amanda Miller announced. So Spinzia, she's excited for this next chapter of life. She has accomplished many great things, but there is more going on in the background there.
That's fantastic. And of course, there have been challenges right along over the last year or so around the bed tax, and she's been a bit under fire, wouldn't you say, Eloise?
Yeah, I think that the issue of the bed tax, this proposed tax that would be levied on tourists who stay for short stays, has become a pretty tense issue. There are folks, leaders of the village, members of the Chamber of Commerce, who object to the tax and the way that the tax has been proposed. So tensions have been higher than I think they have been among Democrats in Rhinebeck in previous years.
Okay, that's really helpful. So let's talk about the two candidates. Let's start with Debbie Hecht. So she's the deputy supervisor, which is essentially the number 2 in command on the town board. All of the town board members have the same single vote. There are 5 of them in total. For listeners who may not know her well, Eloise, what's her background professionally in the community? And tell us a little bit about how she entered town politics.
So Debbie moved to the area relatively recently in 2020. She is a co-founder of a pride organization called Beck Hook Pride. She's very involved in her synagogue, Congregation Emmanuel, across the river in Kingston. She has a 13-year-old kid. A couple years ago, she joined the Rhinebeck Democratic Committee. That was sort of her first touch point with Democratic politics in Rhinebeck. And then last year, Town Supervisor Spinzia asked her if she'd be interested in helping create what's known as the Communications Committee. She did do that, so she was helping with town board comms. And we should note that a member of our board, Chris Travers, is also on that committee. So that was sort of her gateway into town board matters. And last year she ran unopposed for town board. But she said that the seeds of that run and her desire to run for town board were planted in 2024 after Trump won. She said after that election, she was feeling more fired up to get involved in local races.
And a little bit more about her professional background, if you would, for us.
So she has a PhD from Columbia in classics, and then she took some time off from paid work to be a mom. So that was where her energies were devoted for several years. And she helped create this nonprofit, Beck Hook Pride.
Okay. And we should just note that the Beck Hook name comes from Rhinebeck and Red Hook. So it's an organization that covers both communities, Red Hook and Rhinebeck.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
that's right.
tell us, Eloise, what do you think is motivating her candidacy and how did her alliance with Elizabeth Spinzia start? What was it based on?
So Hecht says that when she began working with the comms committee, and also last year, she made a habit of going to the town board meetings. She learned a lot. She liked the way that the board operated and sort of enjoyed getting down into the minutia of government. And so I think her candidacy is partly based on that. She says that she just really likes the work that she's been exposed to so far, and she likes being involved with community. In terms of her relationship with Elizabeth Spinzia, they've known each other for years because of the Rhinebeck Democratic Committee. She describes them as friends. She says that they're friends. They're also definitely political allies. And Spinzia also was, a big supporter of Beck Hook Pride when it launched.
Mhm. And to get the deputy supervisor role, that's not a role for which she was elected. That's a role that she was tapped on the shoulder for by Elizabeth Spinzia. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So let's move on to Amanda and do the same for her. Who is Amanda Miller? What path brought her to the race? Tell us everything we know.
So Amanda Miller is an attorney. She's been involved in civic life in Rhinebeck in various ways for a couple years. She originally moved here in 2015. She has two young children. She has a real estate law practice. She went to New York Law School and Duke for undergrad. And she was elected to the Rhinebeck School District School Board in 2023, but stepped down before her term was through. She was also a special prosecutor for the year 2025. She was not renewed for that role this year. And she was also really involved in the case of Gerson Tercios, the Rhinebeck High School graduate. He's originally from Honduras and he was detained by ICE last summer. She was one of the lawyers who was helping out with his case. She was also, until recently, the first vice president of the Rhinebeck Area Chamber of Commerce. And as we've reported, there's been some tension between the town board and the Chamber of Commerce that, in Miller's telling, began with the occupancy tax that we were just talking about. And she's been one of the more visible faces in that back and forth between the town board and the Chamber of Commerce.
And why has she been a visible face in that, Eloise? In what way?
So the reason that we know about this, one of the ways that we've been reporting on this relationship between the town board and the chamber is this series of letters. The chamber has sent a few letters to the town board. The town board has sent one letter back. Some of the letters have been pretty strongly worded, and Amanda has been the key signatory on multiple of those letters. She says that they were drafted, collectively, but she was the lead signatory on some of them.
And you mentioned something a minute ago that I want to just clarify for our listeners. You said she was a special prosecutor, not Kenneth Starr. So what do you mean by a special prosecutor?
So, a special prosecutor is someone who helps the town when it comes to prosecuting like parking tickets and other violations like that. The town currently has two people doing this role. Amanda was one of two people doing that work last year.
I see. And you said she was not renewed by whom and for what reason, if we know?
So, Town Supervisor Elizabeth Spinzia says it was collectively agreed upon among the town board members that they would not renew Amanda for this year as special prosecutor. It's been a little fuzzy for us to report on this on the record, so I'm not going to share more than that, but it was decided by the town board that she would not be renewed.
Okay. Thank you. So let's just one more question about her biography. She talked to us or to you about working her way through school, balancing law and motherhood, and coming from a blue-collar background with a Black mother and a Jewish father. How much of her campaign so far, Eloise, is rooted in that personal narrative?
I would say it's pretty central. The personal narrative is pretty central to her campaign, at least from what we've seen of the campaign so far. She emphasized in her campaign speech that she's really the sort of person who has had to work very hard for what she's achieved in life. She hasn't had anything handed to her. And so I think for voters who have a similar life experiences or just kind of respect that hustle and drive, that might be appealing.
Awesome. All right, good background setup for us. Thank you, Eloise. So let's look a little bit at the race now. You were at Amanda Miller's campaign launch at Kip's Tavern on Sunday. Tell us a little bit about what was the mood in the room. Who showed up? Who's behind this campaign?
The mood was very positive. It was, yeah, people seemed to be having a great time. I spoke with people who know Miller as a friend, who have worked with her. I saw several people who are involved in Rhinebeck Village politics and civic life, including Village Mayor Gary Bassett, Josh Sager, who's a member of the Village Planning Board, Luciano Valdivia, who is the board president of the Chamber of Commerce, was also there. But I also saw several faces that I didn't know, and I had to do a lot of introducing myself, asking people who they were. So certainly not everyone was known to me.
Hmm. Okay, so a fun, upbeat kind of event, sounds like.
Hmm.
All right. So Miller began by saying she was campaigning on change. I put that in quotes, and she suggested term limits for planning board members and town board members. What specifically is she proposing to alter about how town government operates?
So one of her more specific proposals relates to the planning board. She said, so in addition to term limits for planning board members, she also spoke about simplifying the code to make it easier to make small common sense modifications to homes with, quote, without entering into an expensive, protracted bureaucratic nightmare, end quote. So I think that that means not having to go to the planning board at all, but streamlining planning board processes. She's also said she's concerned about decisions being made by the town board behind closed doors and that this would end if she was elected.
Did she give any specific examples of that, Eloise?
She gave an example with respect to the Six Senses, the lawsuit that Rhinebeck, the town of Rhinebeck, has joined, challenging the Six Senses development over in Clinton and Hyde Park. She said that closed door votes enabled that lawsuit. So that was one of her examples.
Okay. And how are Debbie Hecht and Elizabeth Spinzia responding to those critiques?
So one thing that Amanda Miller has said about Debbie Hecht specifically is that she is the town supervisor's, quote, hand-picked successor. Hecht says that she raised her hand to run because she wanted to, not because she was asked or selected. And both Spinzia and another board member, two other board members who I spoke to, said that some of the criticisms seemed unfair, and Alan Scher, one board member, also called them, quote, false. So some strong pushback there.
Can you be a little more specific there about Alan Scher? He's the only other town board member, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I am, who went to the event and on Sunday and then had some reaction to it. Tell us a little bit about that, Eloise.
Yeah, so I was actually standing right in front of Alan when Amanda Miller was speaking and giving her speech, and he had a audible reaction, sort of objecting to things that she was saying. I didn't catch exactly what it was, but then afterwards, he and I talked about the speech and his impression of it. And one of the things that he objected to was Miller highlighting some parking regulations that were debated last fall. The town board didn't end up going forward with a set of parking regulations that would have imposed a fine of up to $900 and also a potential jail time for repeat parking violations. Alan Scher said that the lawyer who worked with the town suggested the language for those regulations based on what was in code in the surrounding municipalities. And so the idea of jail time and regulations didn't originate with any of the town board members. Miller, in her speech, she said that it was a proposed regulation. She didn't say that it had passed, but he thought that it was unfair to place that at the feet of the town board.
Mm.
Um, Another thing that he objected to is Miller's speech suggested that the town board is sort of responsible for how slow going the Rhinecliff train station has progressed. That the Rhinecliff station down there since 2020, there hasn't been much movement on the much anticipated revitalization project. And he said that the town has no direct control over Amtrak and the pace of their work.
Got it. So let's talk now, Eloise, about relative experience. So neither of these women has really much of any experience in legislative action in Rhinebeck or elsewhere. Is that correct? Hecht has been on the town board for about 7 weeks, and Amanda Miller has never served in elected office, correct?
Amanda Miller was on the school board.
True. Okay. So how are each of them positioning themselves as experienced and ready to go on day one? Let's take them one at a time. Talk to us about Debbie Hecht first.
So Heck says that she's been going to town board meetings well before when she was actually elected to the town board. So she learned a lot that way about how the town board processes work, who comes to town board meetings, and what, the issues that they deal with, and sort of has gotten up to speed on process and issues that way. And like I said before, that she's sort of enthusiastic about the unsexy, day-to-day technocratic work of town government.
Mhm.
And Hecht also says that she's learning a lot on the job right now.
So tell us now about Amanda Miller and how she's planning to be ready to go on day one if she's elected.
Amanda Miller is an attorney, so she said that this background will help her get up to speed on the duties of town supervisor. She also said that she's closely following town board meetings and reviewing local laws. And she said she also plans to get up to speed by spending time out in the community, so talking to residents, business owners, local leaders, that type of thing.
Mhm. Okay. We've already talked a bit about the tension between the town board and the Chamber of Commerce around the bed tax, a little bit around the Six Senses lawsuit. How much is that backdrop shaping this race, especially given Miller's past role with the chamber?
I think as a general matter, Miller's stance of wanting to change many things about the town board and things about Rhinebeck politics is influenced by this tension between the town board and the Chamber of Commerce. That said, she did not mention that specific back and forth that we've reported on in her speech. So while I do think it's there in the background and a part of this overall stance that she has, she's not actively foregrounding it in her campaign.
How is Debbie Hecht herself going to roll out her campaign after the event that Amanda Miller had at the tavern?
So Heck says that she's busy gathering petition signatures to get on the ballot, and that eventually she wants to have smaller gatherings to get to know people. She said she thinks that that would be effective in terms of just getting out the word and having people understand who she is and what she's about. Today, she said that there was no sort of immediate plans for an event in the style that Amanda Miller had on Sunday.
Okay. Eloise, we had heard from people like Luciano Valdivia of the chamber leader, that he and others want a positive feeling in town, that they've come off of a really rough, in their view, patch of controversy and challenge and tension with the town board and with Elizabeth. Yet somehow the race already feels a bit personal and a bit tense. Is that just me, or is this shaping up to be a bit of a personality clash, an ideological fight? Is it a battle over governing style? do you have any, even a battle over development versus non-development? Do we have any sense yet as to what really the race is going to be about?
I think things do feel tense. And, it is early days. So how things feel now may not be how they feel in a month, in 2 weeks. A lot could change. This race has just kicked off. I do think that there's a sense where, Miller had some positive messages in her speech. She certainly has positive things to say, some real ideas about how for policy changes. But her message was also a real indictment on the current town board and their work. The current town board says, well, we feel differently. We stand by our decisions. We don't think this is fair. So I think, just in the past few days, that has sort of set the tone. But again, it's early days. Things could change.
Well, okay. Just one more question about the lineup of alliances on this campaign. Who are the key power brokers that are lining up behind each candidate? And what does that tell us about the coalitions that may be forming here?
So, on the Miller side, we know that Toby Uznick, who is a comps professional and a Red Hook voter, is involved in her campaign. Leah Conklin, an advocacy and comms person, is also involved. A woman named Kate Cox, who lives in Rhinecliff, was one of the people who introduced Amanda. Luciano Valdivia, who's I mentioned above and is the board president of the Rhinebeck Chamber of Commerce. And another name that I would mention is Gregory Copeland, who is an attorney who knows Amanda from law school and also worked on the Herson Tercios case. So it's sort of this that gives you a sense of the constellation of people who are volunteering for her.
Well,
Oh, and
also Gary Bassett, right?
yes, thank you for mentioning that. Village Mayor Gary Bassett, before we knew that the candidate was Amanda Miller, sent out a note plugging her upcoming event and that saying that he was supporting her. I saw him there at the event on Sunday. So Amanda Miller has the backing of the village mayor.
Okay. And what about Debbie Hecht? So she's, of course, gotten the endorsement already of Town Supervisor Elizabeth Spinzia. Who else is on her team?
So because she hasn't had an event yet, this is still coming into focus for me. I do know that John Rossi, who has become a bit of a force in Rhinebeck politics and Democratic politics more broadly, he was the campaign manager for Cara Gary, who ran for county court judge last fall and won. John Rossi said that he will support Hecht and plans to volunteer for her. Rossi is a member of this group called the Rhinebeck Democrats Club. Rossi said that the club itself, is not going to make an endorsement, that they don't sort of coalesce and volunteer as a group for one candidate. But he did say that he suspects that other club members will support Hecht as well.
Mhm. Very, very interesting set of people on each side of this race so far. And Eloise, it's not too late for others to jump into the race, correct? Tell us a little bit about the process to run in this primary.
So it's certainly not too late. Petitioning to get on the ballot as a Democratic candidate is currently underway, and it goes through April. And the number of signatures that you need to get is not all that high. It's 150 signatures. Miller said on Sunday that she's going to shoot for twice that, but who knows? We could have another candidate, and then things will really get interesting.
And when you say through April, you don't mean through the whole month of April, you mean through early April,
Oh,
correct?
yes, yeah, April 2nd is the
April 2nd. Okay.
gathering signatures.
Got it. So people can decide, new candidates can enter and emerge between now and then, which is about 6 weeks from now. So how will our listeners today, how will they know what's going on?
They will know because they're going to read the Daily Catch, and we're going to be all over this and keep people informed. So,
All right. That's
so
absolutely right. We got to plug our own product here, right? Need the daily catch. All right. Well, anything else that our listeners should know about this race, Eloise, before we sign off today?
I don't think so. Reach out to us if there are things you think we should have our eye on, do tell us, and lots more to come.
And I'm going to give you listeners our The contact for Eloise, it's Eloise, Eloise, at thedailycatch.org. Think about Eloise at the plaza. That's our girl. Thank you, Eloise, so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
So that concludes the catch up. Thanks to Maddie Rosenberg, Jen Hammoud, and Esther Martell at our partner Radio Free Rhinecliff for their help in producing this episode. We'll see you next time.